Rick was a colleague of mine, but before that, he was my boss, and he was my first boss. Rick was the co-founder, along with Frank Taylor, Gold Coulthard, Don Spencer, and Curtis Crawford, of Funbag Animation, which was only a few blocks away from here. I was a young 21-year-old coming out of school with zero prospects of work. I was very untalented at the time, but there was a studio that I had to work for, and that was Funbag. It was the coolest place to go. It was stylish, it was fun, it was exciting, and they worked on amazing shows. And that's a big part of what Rick had to bring to it. That studio began in the 90s, coming out of the 80s animation and into the 90s. And they really provided a place that nurtured us animators who graduated in the early to mid 90s. It gave us the opportunity to grow our roots, to try all different aspects of animation. I was a layout artist, I was a character designer, a prop designer, an animator, a key animator, and eventually found my passion with storyboarding, which was the same passion that Rick had. In that studio, you could hear Rick with his loud laugh. You would see his big smile and his strong handshake. Rick was very competitive, and being a storyboard artist myself, he was able to mentor me in areas. One thing he mentored was his competitiveness. And he heard that I did a storyboard in 2 weeks, and God, man, he said, I'm gonna do a storyboard in 2 weeks while running a company. And I got shown pretty quick that he could match my speed. Over time, Funbag saw its end. It put almost a decade in, if I'm correct, Frank? Yeah. And it fostered so many talents, so many people, so many friends of mine that started there and have expanded in the industry into other countries, other provinces, other positions, other career fields, and even creating other studios. When that business dissolved, I was told by a good friend of mine, Drew Edwards, who was very close to Rick. They were best friends. He said that Rick looked at that business and said, okay, what went wrong? What can I do different? Rick didn't give up. He didn't say, well, packing it in, that was my shot. What did he do? He ended up getting right back into the digital boom with his brother, Corey. And Corey sat right behind me at Funbag, shaking his leg like he is right now, telling me to shut up because I was talking too much, or telling me to sweep up the hair that I would cut haircuts for $5 a head at Funbag, and they let me do that. Rick, though, did not let me cut his hair. Why screw around with a masterpiece? But at Big Jump, he continued to do the same thing, which was nurture artists, grow the community, and build a company that people wanted to work for. And they worked on many great shows, and they still do. Corey's carrying that legacy with his partners as well. Later on, I would meet Rick, not very often, but we would meet up, and it was usually here at the Animation Festival. And I was always greeted with a loud laugh, a big smile, a strong handshake. Like many of you here who knew Rick personally or through business, you're gonna miss that meetup, that bump. But just know that he's watching now, with a loud laugh, a big smile. But he doesn't want that handshake quite yet. You've got work to do. So keep going, and someday he'll meet you with that handshake. With that, I'd like to call up his former partner, an executive director and chairman of the board of the Canadian Film Institute, and former director of the Ottawa International Animation Festival, Frank Taylor.
Rick's passing was a shock and sorrow for us all. And while the shock may have subsided some, there's an enduring vacuum, a void that Rick once filled, most particularly for Cheryl, for his sons, Mark and Sean, and for and for Corey, there you are, sorry, for Corey, his brother, protege, business partner, and friend. From Corey, I heard about when he was 8 years old, back in 1983, and Rick was already working in California. His parents told him, your brother's name is going to be on TV. So they ran into the living room and gathered around the set, and there it was in the end credits of an episode of He-Man Masters of the Universe. A young boy knew immediately what he wanted to be. The course was set. As these conversations took place over the phone, on video calls, or over a couple of bottles of wine, the same themes kept coming up. First of all, Rick was an artist, a highly skilled draftsman who drew like the wind. And I'm sorry to break your record, Jamie, but I'll tell you this. As a storyboard artist, his scene building and shot selections were very cinematic, inspired by his love of live action. He was so fast that he at one point at least did 3 boards at once. And there weren't any post-it. As his career progressed, he became a director, a producer, and a founding partner in not one, but 2 prominent studios that were located here in Ottawa, but were known around the world, Funbag and Big Joe. To all of these pursuits, he brought a passion and an extraordinary work ethic. He respected the artists he worked with. He was one of them, after all, and recognized that they were the principal assets of a successful studio. This is the line that I got before, it was clear to all of them that he knew what he was talking about. And he took time teaching them about storyboarding, the art, the techniques, the process, how to deliver their work, how to work smart. He would stand by the people he worked with, both literally and figuratively, and help them figure things out, a rarity in this business. He often said, you can do better, not in a discouraging way, but intended as inspiration. Francois told me how early on Rick said to him, in urging him to push his work further, make me want to be you. Think about that for a minute. Make me want to be you. It was that exhortation, Francois told me, that he, Francois, went on to use over and over again in his own long supervising, directing, and producing career. In addition to being an artist, Rick was hardwired to be an entrepreneur. He was a human calculator. Whether it was managing his own money, which he did brilliantly, he bought his first house when he was 22, or playing the market, or running a production, or running a studio, he enjoyed the game of it. He was measured, and he was calm, and he was fearless. That's not to say that he didn't face enormous challenges. This business is fraught with them, as we all know, particularly today. But he had swagger. That's not to say, it wasn't an empty swagger, not window dressing, but a confidence that he could figure things out, that he could face just about anything. I got to know Rick well during the 8 years from 1996 to 2004, when he and Don, who left the company partway through that period, and Gord and Curtis and I were partners at Funbag. Of the 5 of us, with Rick's passing and Curtis's death just a year and a half ago, there are only 3 of us left now. It's a sad, strange, and bewildering feeling. We rode a wave together. From a service company that worked on shows like The Simpsons and Beavis and Butthead and Watership Down, we moved to proprietary production with properties like Total Patrol, Mole Sisters, and For Better or For Worse. We'd recently moved to lovely new premises that Amy referred to at 55 Murray Street in the market, and things were really beginning to take off. I have an enduring visual image of Rick from those days. He was the producer of Total Patrol. Jerry Popovich and Nelson Shen at ACOM in Korea, and some of you here may remember him, were co-directors. I was Funbag's executive producer. It must have been December, probably just before Christmas. Rick was sitting alone in his office at his light table, in his office at the end of the hall, totally engrossed in his work, with his big floor-to-ceiling window behind him. It was after 5 o'clock, pitch black outside, and the wind was driving fat snowflakes against the glass. and I could hear the basso profundo voice of Long John Baldry, the voice of Mistletoe, saying, "Listen to the thunder trees, Panther Cap," or something like that. Everything we were doing seemed to be wrapped up in that moment. In 1996, the British company, Polygram Filmed Entertainment, who were producers through their various subsidiary labels, like Working Title and Casablanca, and who made films like Midnight Express, Dead Man Walking, Trainspotting, The Big Lebowski, and 4 Weddings and a Funeral, decided that they wanted to buy a quarter of Funbag and make us one of their labels. In short order, they invited us to New York, put us all up in the presidential suite on the top floor of the New York Hilton, and they wined and dined us in a private room at the famous Prohibition-era speakeasy, the 21 Club. The club secret wine cellar, by the way, held personal collections of Elizabeth Taylor, John F. Kennedy, Ernest Hemingway, Sophia Loren, Judy Garland, Frank Sinatra, and Marilyn Monroe. I remember all of us in that suite putting on our stylish duds. Rick was particularly stylish. Getting ready to head out to our dinner meeting at 21. 5 small-town Ontario guys from Belleville, Thorold, Morwood, and Kirkland Lake, incredulous at what was happening to us. It took a year to close that deal, but we did. A year later, Seagram's bought Universal, and shortly thereafter they bought Polygram, and then they merged the two under the Universal brand. Suddenly, the Polygram leadership who had created our deal were gone. The mind and management had completely changed, and we became a curious asset on Universal's balance sheet. While their purchase checks had long ago cleared and their financial contributions continued as per the contract, we couldn't get Universal to understand our potential value to them. We were pretty much ignored and then forgotten. We soldiered on though through some amazing years and some amazing series. There's a point to all this. In 2004, I left Funbag to follow other dreams in partnership with last year's Lifetime Achievement Award winner Elsie Clark. Rick was to say, the very least, annoyed with me. We didn't talk for a few years. He had ended up being thrust into dealing with the business affairs aspect of the company, and playing the role of executive producer. He wasn't happy at all. So we didn't speak for a couple of years. Then one day, out of the blue, he called me to go for a coffee. He told me that he finally understood the work that I did during my years at Funbag. He apologized to me, and we went on to do 3 other projects. True to form, it was a quick study. He picked up everything I knew and then some. He'd become a very good executive producer. He came to understand the architecture of complicated global deals, and applying his human calculator computational skills, could run circles around some of the most experienced people in the business. He could, as his dad once taught him, see the forest through the trees. Putting the intellectual property of Funbag into a new company he formed with Mark Edwards, he was excited to have moved on, forming his second studio in partnership with his brother Corey. As excited as Corey was to be going into business with Rick, according to everybody I spoke to, was equally proud and excited to be working with Corey. There were many other themes that recurred as I talked about Rick with his longtime friends. He was competitive, as we heard already. Whether it was in business or in his 50s when he absolutely smoked his adult sons on uphill bike climbs, or many decades before that, playing darts at the Carlton Tavern, Rick surely wasn't gunning for second place. He was persistent, a quality without which you cannot survive as an independent producer in this country or any other. He was passionate about his work. He was passionate about his work, about his boys, about Cheryl, about good food and good wine. The latter the result of some reciprocal tutelage from Francois. He was into fitness and was proud of being buff, only half joking when he compared himself to Clint Eastwood. He spoke his mind and he had no moral code. You knew where you stood with Rick. And he changed the trajectories of a lot of people's lives. Corey talked about that. Francois talked about that. And not just in animation. Is Drew here yet? Okay. He told me I could say this. And not just in animation. Drew told me how in just a few minutes one afternoon, Rick, drawing on his own deep experience, managing his own money, crafted Drew's retirement plan and showed him that it was within his immediate grasp. I remember Rick offering me financial advice. God, I wish I'd listened to him. From a very young age, Rick internalized lessons he learned from his father. There was one of Bill Morrison's maxims that we often heard from Rick as we were embarking on new projects at Funbag. I'm pretty sure he and his dad would be happy that I'm sharing it with you here today. It's good advice in business and in life. Here's how it goes. Say what you're going to do and do what you said you were going to do. Rick did that, and because of it, his life was indeed an achievement. I'd now like to invite Jamie back to the stage for the presentation of the Janfield Life Achievement Award.
On behalf of my family, his partner Cheryl, son, Rick and Sean, it is my great honor to accept this lifetime achievement. For my brother, one and only Richard T. Morrison. I really want to thank the team here at the OIAF for organizing this event. I also want to thank my friends at Jam for sponsoring this award, supporting me throughout the last 6 months. You've all been amazing. Over the years, you've been so understanding, passionate, tears, friends, sometimes co-workers. Your support has made my family very proud to be part of a true, incredible community, the Ottawa animation community. Rick was a man of many talents. He could draw like the wind, close a deal, and still have time for a glass of wine at the bar, where he likely met most of you in what he would call a casual meeting. Frank, you pretty much summed up most of his history, but you all knew him. Brought a lot of joy into the world and wanted nothing more than to support our community and create opportunities for those who also had stories to tell. If you ever met Rick, probably left with two things: a smile on your face, funny quip that you couldn't help but share with someone else. He had that gift, never forgot a name, never missed a chance to lift someone's spirits, and never stopped to champion the people around him, including myself. Rick's legacy is in the studios that he built, and the shows he created, and the careers he inspired. But most of all, it's in the joy and laughter he brought to everybody who knew him. Thank you for honoring him today. You would have been so very, very proud. And then he'd probably all ask us to raise a glass, say something funny. But most importantly, to continue to tell our stories. Thank you very, very much. Appreciate it.